The scent of expensive lilies and betrayal hung heavy in Elara Vance's Bel Air mansion. 7 months pregnant, glowing, she'd envisioned a baby shower filled with laughter, not a decree from her own husband, Damien, banning her from it. His words, cold and final, echoed a chilling new side to the man she loved. But Damien Vance, CEO of Vance Industries, had underestimated his wife. He thought he could break her, isolate her. He was about to learn that a mother's protective instinct combined with a brilliant legal mind was a force far more formidable than his billions. The stage was set not for a party, but for a showdown. Elara Dubois had met Damien Vance during a charity auction at the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles. She wasn't there as a bidder, but as a junior event coordinator, ensuring the smooth flow of champagne and canapes for LA's glittering elite. Damien, a recent tech billionaire, whose company Vance Industries had just launched a revolutionary AI-driven logistics software, was the night's biggest donor. He was sharp, undeniably handsome, with a jawline that seemed carved from granite, and possessed an intensity that both intrigued and slightly intimidated Elara. Their courtship had been a whirlwind. Damien, accustomed to getting what he wanted, pursued Elara with a single-minded focus that swept her off her feet. He showered her with gifts, whisked her away on private jets to Parisian weekends, and proposed 6 months later on a yacht in Monte Carlo, a colossal diamond reflecting the Mediterranean sun. Elara, a kind-hearted woman from a modest background, sometimes felt like she was living a Cinderella story. She loved Damien not for his wealth, but for the vulnerability he occasionally let slip, the boyish enthusiasm he had for new tech, and the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, or so she thought. Their first year of marriage was idyllic, spent in their sprawling Bel Air estate with panoramic views of the city. Elara found her footing as Mrs. Vance, navigating the complex social landscape of Damien's world. Then came the joyous news: she was pregnant. Damien seemed thrilled, his initial excitement genuine. He'd hold her, his hand resting protectively on her growing belly, whispering dreams of their future, of a son to carry on the Vance name, or a daughter to spoil rotten. It was Damien's sister, Isabel Vance, who first cast a shadow over their happiness. Isabel was a woman sculpted by privilege and bitterness. Older than Damien by 5 years, she had always felt overshadowed by her brother's meteoric success. Her own trust fund-supported art gallery, a pale comparison to his global empire. She viewed Elara with thinly veiled disdain, seeing her as an outsider, a gold digger who had somehow ensnared her brilliant brother. Darling Isabel would coo, her voice dripping with saccharine malice. "You must be so overwhelmed with all of this. The Vance family. We have certain standards, certain expectations. It's not always easy for newcomers to adapt." Elara tried her best to befriend Isabel, to show her that her love for Damien was genuine. But Isabel's barbs were relentless, subtle digs about Elara's family, her pre-Damien career, her taste in clothes. Damien, unfortunately, often seemed oblivious, or worse, mildly amused by his sister's teasing. "That's just Izzy," he'd say, with a dismissive wave of his hand. "She's always been a bit protective. Don't take it to heart." But as Elara's pregnancy progressed, Isabel's influence over Damien seemed to grow. She became a more frequent visitor to their estate, her whispers in Damien's ear longer and more intense. Damien started to change. The easy laughter became rarer, replaced by a preoccupied frown. He grew critical, questioning Elara's spending, her choice of friends for the upcoming baby shower, even her ideas for the nursery. "Isabel thinks pastel yellow is rather common for the nursery Elara. She suggested a more sophisticated monochrome palette. Perhaps you should consult her. But Damien, I love the sunny yellow. It's cheerful. Yes, well, Isabel has a keen eye for these things, and she mentioned that your friend Chloe, isn't she the one who works at that little bakery? Perhaps it's best to keep the guest list for the shower more aligned with our circle. Elara was stunned. Chloe had been her best friend since kindergarten, her rock through thick and thin. Damien, Chloe is like a sister to me. Of course she's coming to my baby shower. Damien sighed, a sound of profound irritation. Elara, you're not thinking strategically. Every event is a reflection on us, on Vance Industries. Isabel is merely trying to help you understand that. The arguments became more frequent, more heated. Elara felt increasingly isolated. Damien, the man who had once looked at her with such adoration, now seemed to regard her as a problem to be managed, an asset that wasn't performing to expectations. The baby shower was supposed to be a beacon of joy in this encroaching darkness. Elara, with the help of Chloe, had been planning it for months. It was to be held in the sun-drenched gardens of their estate, a celebration of life and love. She'd picked out a beautiful periwinkle gown that accentuated her 7-month bump, ordered a whimsical cake decorated with tiny sugar animals, and handwritten invitations to her closest friends and family, along with a selection of Damien's business associates and their wives. A compromise. Then a week before the shower, Damien dropped the bombshell. He found her in the nursery, humming softly as she folded tiny baby grows. He didn't embrace her, didn't even look at the layette. His face was a mask of cold resolve. Elara, we need to talk about the baby shower. Oh, good, she said, smiling, relieved he was finally taking an interest. I was just finalizing the seating arrangements. Do you think Mrs. Henderson will mind sitting next to Aunt Carol? The shower is off, Damien stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Elara's smile froze. What? What do you mean? Off, the caterers are confirmed, the flowers ordered, the invitation sent. I mean it's cancelled, or rather, he corrected, a cruel precision in his tone. It will proceed, but you will not be attending. The air rushed out of Elara's lungs. She felt dizzy, her hand flying to her belly as if to shield her unborn child from his words. What are you talking about, Damien? Why wouldn't I attend my own baby shower? Isabel and I have discussed it. It's become clear that your presence would be inappropriate at this time. Inappropriate, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'm the mother. It's my shower. Damien finally looked at her, his eyes like chips of ice. Isabel has raised some concerns, valid concerns, about your suitability, your recent behavior, your emotional outbursts. Emotional outbursts? Elara cried, tears welling. I'm pregnant, Damien, and you've been treating me like a stranger for weeks. Of course, I'm emotional. Precisely, he said, seizing on her distress. You're unpredictable. And frankly, Elara Isabel has put a lot of effort into organizing this event to be a sophisticated affair, reflecting well on the Vance name. Your current state might detract from that. It's better this way. A quiet day for you rest. Isabel will handle everything. Tears streamed down Elara's face. Isabel, this is Isabel's doing, isn't it? She's been poisoning you against me. Damien's jaw tightened. Isabel has been a pillar of support and clarity. She sees things you in your condition cannot. The decision is final, Elara. You will not attend the baby shower. It's for the best. For the family. For the Vance reputation." He turned to leave the dismissal absolute. Elara sank onto the rocking chair, the soft pastel yellow of the nursery walls seeming to mock her. Her heart shattered into a million pieces. This wasn't just about a party. This was a declaration. Her husband, the father of her child, was publicly disowning her, siding with a manipulative sister and effectively erasing her from her own life. The gilded cage had slammed shut its bars, cold and unyielding. But as the initial shockwave of pain subsided, a new feeling began to stir within Elara. A cold, hard knot of anger. He thought she was weak, emotional, easily dismissed. He thought Isabel's machinations had won. Damien Vance was about to discover just how wrong he was. He had banned her from her baby shower. He would live to regret that decision with every fiber of his being. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her child, and for her child, Elara would fight. The days following Damien's cruel decree were a blur of disbelief and a slowly simmering rage for Elara. She confined herself mostly to her suite, the luxurious bedroom and sitting area, feeling more like a prison than a sanctuary. The staff, no doubt informed of her indisposition, treated her with a mixture of pity and awkward deference, their hushed whispers following her like shadows. Isabel, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of activity, her triumphant laughter echoing from the downstairs parlors as she finalized arrangements for her baby shower. Elara could sometimes hear her on the phone, her voice dripping with false concern. "Oh, Elara's just not feeling up to it, poor dear. Hormones, you know. But the shower must go on for Damien, for the baby." Each word was like a fresh stab to Elara's heart. She ate little, slept less. Her initial tears of despair morphed into a steely resolve. Damien had made his choice, aligning himself with Isabel's poison. He saw her as an emotional, hormonal inconvenience. He clearly didn't know her at all. Her first call was to Chloe. Her best friend listened in horrified silence as Elara recounted Damien's ultimatum and Isabel's machinations. "That absolute, I can't even say the words," Chloe seethed. "Elara, you can't let them do this. This is insane. You have to fight him." "Oh, I intend to," Elara said, her voice surprisingly calm, the earlier tremors replaced by an icy determination. "But I can't do it alone, Chloe, and I can't fight dirty like Isabel does. I need to fight smart." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I need a lawyer," Elara stated. "A very, very good one." Chloe, despite her bakery job, had an uncanny knack for knowing people who knew people. 2 days later, after discreet inquiries and a string of referrals, she came back with a name, Marcus Thorne. Thorne was a legend in Los Angeles legal circles, a shark in a bespoke suit known for his ferocious litigation skills, particularly in high-stakes divorce and contractual disputes involving the city's wealthiest denizens. He was expensive, ruthless, and exactly what Elara needed. Getting an appointment with Marcus Thorne wasn't easy, but Chloe had emphasized the urgency and the names involved. Vance Industries was a big fish. Elara secured a consultation at his sleek Century City office, the very air crackling with power and discretion. Marcus Thorne was in his late 40s, impeccably dressed with eyes that missed nothing. He listened intently as Elara, composed and articulate, laid out her story. She didn't cry. She presented facts. The whirlwind romance, the prenuptial agreement Damien had insisted upon, which she'd barely glanced at, so blinded by love and trust, Isabel's relentless campaign of undermining her, Damien's increasing coldness, and finally the humiliating ban from her own baby shower. Mr. Vance claims my presence is inappropriate and that I am emotionally unstable. Elara concluded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. His sister is effectively hijacking my life, and he's letting her. I'm 7 months pregnant, Mr. Thorne. This isn't just about a party. It's about my standing my child's future and the fact that my husband is trying to erase me. Thorne leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. Mrs. Vance, he began, his voice a low, measured baritone. What is it you hope to achieve? I want to attend my baby shower, Elara said firmly. Not just attend, I want to walk in there and show them I won't be bullied. But more than that, I need to understand what's happening. Why Damien has changed so drastically. And I need to protect myself and my baby. That prenup. I signed it, but I feel like I was naive. Let's start with the prenuptial agreement, Thorne said. Do you have a copy? Elara had managed to retrieve it from the home safe, her hands shaking as she did so. Damien had told her it was a formality, standard procedure for a man of his wealth, designed to protect his existing assets and the future of Vance Industries. He'd been so charming, so reassuring, that she'd signed it with the cursory glance of a woman deeply in love, never imagining it would one day be a potential weapon against her. Thorne's eyes scanned the document, his expression unreadable. After several long minutes, he looked up. This is a fairly standard prenup for a man of Mr. Vance's assets. However, it's quite stringent. It largely seeks to protect assets acquired before the marriage and delineate separate property. But there are clauses regarding marital conduct and definitions of abandonment or actions detrimental to the Vance family reputation that are interestingly worded, potentially open to aggressive interpretation. Elara felt a chill. Could he use that against me? Could he try to say my emotional outbursts are detrimental? Potentially, Thorne conceded. With a sympathetic judge, or one influenced by the Vance name, it's not impossible. What about Isabel? What's her angle in all of this, beyond sibling rivalry? Elara hesitated. She manages an art gallery, but I've always had the feeling it's more of a vanity project. Damien subsidizes it heavily. She seems resentful of his success, yet utterly dependent on his generosity. And she despises me. I think she sees me as a threat to her influence over him, and perhaps to her financial lifeline, if Damien's loyalties were to shift entirely to me and the baby. Interesting, Thorne mused. A dependent sibling with a motive to sow discord. We might need to look into Ms. Vance's financials, her gallery's performance. Sometimes people acting irrationally are driven by hidden pressures. He tapped the prenup. As for this shower, legally he can't ban you from your own home or an event in your honor if it's at your marital residence. However, he can certainly make it unpleasant. The question is, how do you want to play this? I don't want to hide, Elara said, her chin lifting. I want to walk into that party. But I don't want to walk in alone and be humiliated. I want them to know I'm not the fragile, hysterical woman they're painting me as. A slow smile spread across Marcus Thorne's face. Mrs. Vance, I believe we can arrange that. The element of surprise can be a powerful tool. Let them think you've capitulated. Let Isabel preen and Damien feel secure in his decision. And then we make an entrance they won't soon forget. He proposed a plan. Elara would remain secluded, reinforcing their narrative of her being unwell or too emotional. In the meantime, Thorne and his team would do a rapid deep dive into Isabel Vance's affairs and any recent unusual activities within Damien's finances or communications that they could access. Knowledge is power, Mrs. Vance. The more we know, the stronger your position. For the next few days, Elara played the part of the broken woman, while inwardly she was a whirlwind of nervous energy and growing anticipation. Thorne's confidence was infectious. He exuded an aura of control that she desperately needed. Chloe was her secret lifeline, smuggling in healthy food. Elara suspected the staff were under instructions about her diet and updates from the outside world, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Are you sure about this, Elara?" Chloe asked the night before the shower. "Damien will be furious. Isabel will probably spontaneously combust." Elara looked at her reflection. The stress had taken a toll. There were dark circles under her eyes, but her gaze was steady, resolute. She placed a hand on her belly. "I have to do this, Chloe. For him. Or her." She smiled faintly. Besides, Mr. Thorne seems to think a little public theatre might be just what the doctor ordered. The day of the baby shower dawned bright and sunny, a perfect California day. From her window, Elara could see the flurry of activity in the garden below. Florists were arranging towering displays of white roses and peonies. Isabel's choice, of course, stark and cold compared to the cheerful sunflowers Elara had wanted. Caterers hurried back and forth, and the strains of a string quartet tuning up drifted on the breeze. It was the picture of elegance, a perfectly curated event for LA's elite. And Elara Vance, the mother-to-be, was an exile in her own home. But not for long. At precisely 2:00 p.m., as Marcus Thorne had instructed, Elara descended the grand staircase of her home. She wasn't wearing the periwinkle gown she'd dreamed of. Instead, she wore a bespoke cream trouser suit, elegant and powerful, that nonetheless accommodated her pregnant form. Her hair was styled in a sleek chignon, her makeup understated, but flawless. She looked not like a victim, but like a woman in charge. At the bottom of the stairs, Marcus Thorne awaited her, his expression coolly professional. He offered her his arm. "Ready, Mrs. Vance?" "As I'll ever be, Mr. Thorne," she replied, her voice steady. Together they walked towards the garden, towards the heart of the celebration from which she had been so cruelly barred. The storm was about to break. The murmur of polite conversation and the gentle melodies of the string quartet grew louder as Elara and Marcus Thorne approached the arched entrance to the main garden. 2 discreet security guards hired by Isabel for the event stood sentry. They recognized Elara, of course, and their eyes widened in surprise. One of them, a burly man named Frank, who had always been kind to her, shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Vance, We weren't expecting you." "I believe I'm the guest of honor," Elara said, her voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable note of authority. "Or rather, the mother of the guest of honor. Please, step aside." Frank looked to his colleague, then back at Elara's resolute face and the formidable presence of Marcus Thorne beside her. He swallowed. "Mr. Vance gave specific instructions." Thorne spoke for the first time, his tone quiet but steely. "Mr. Vance's instructions regarding his wife's presence in her own home are legally unenforceable and frankly ludicrous. Are you going to physically prevent Mrs. Vance from entering her own property? Gentlemen, I assure you that would be unwise and actionable." He flashed a gold-embossed business card. "Marcus Thorne, Thorne and Associates. I suggest you call whoever is in charge of your detail and inform them of this development, or simply let us pass." The guards, clearly out of their depth, exchanged another panicked glance and reluctantly stepped away from the archway. Elara took a deep breath and, with Thorn at her side, stepped into the garden. The scene before them was one of opulent festivity. Around 50 guests, a curated mix of Los Angeles society. Damien's business partners and a smattering of Isabel's art world acquaintances mingled on the perfectly manicured lawn. Champagne flutes clinked. Waiters circulated with silver trays of elaborate hors d'oeuvres. At the center of it all, holding court near a mountain of beautifully wrapped gifts, was Isabel Vance. She was dressed in a vibrant, almost garish fuchsia gown, a stark contrast to the pale creams and blues of the other guests, ensuring all eyes were on her. She was mid-anecdote, a theatrical laugh tinkling from her lips when she spotted them. Isabel's laughter died in her throat. Her perfectly painted smile froze, then contorted into an expression of outrage and disbelief. The glass she was holding slipped from her fingers, shattering on the stone patio with a crash that momentarily silenced the string quartet and drew every eye in the garden towards the source of the commotion, and then towards Elara and Thorn. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "Is that Elara Vance? I thought she was ill. Who is that man with her? Damien said she wouldn't be here." Damien, who had been engrossed in conversation with a potential investor, Alistair Finch, turned to see what had caused the sudden silence. His eyes locked onto Elara, and his face, which had been animated and charming, turned ashen. He looked from Elara to Thorn, then to his sister, whose face was now a mask of fury. The color drained from Damien's face, replaced by a flush of anger. He strode towards them, his movements stiff with rage. "Elara, what is the meaning of this I told you? You told me I wasn't welcome at my own baby shower." "Damien," Elara said, her voice clear and carrying easily across the suddenly silent garden. "I believe you were mistaken." Isabel, recovering her composure, rushed to Damien's side. "How dare you?" she hissed at Elara, her voice low and venomous. "After everything Damien has done for you, you defy him like this. You embarrass him in front of all these people. You truly are unwell." "Actually, Isabel," Elara replied, her gaze unwavering, "I've never felt clearer in my life." She turned her attention back to her husband. "Damien, this is Marcus Thorn, my legal counsel. Mr. Thorn, this is my husband Damien Vance and his sister Isabel Vance." Thorn inclined his head slightly. "Mr. Vance, Ms. Vance." Damien ignored Thorn, his eyes blazing at Elara. "Legal counsel? What in God's name do you need legal counsel for? Elara, have you lost your mind? Perhaps she has Damien, darling." Isabel interjected her hand possessively on Damien's arm. "She's clearly hysterical." "Security," she called out, though the guards, Frank and his partner, were hovering uncertainly near the entrance, clearly unwilling to get further involved. "Please escort Mrs. Vance and her associate out." "That won't be necessary, Miss Vance," Thorn said smoothly. "Mrs. Vance is here to enjoy her baby shower, the one being thrown in her honor, in her home. Unless, of course, Mr. Vance, you wish to publicly evict your 7 months pregnant wife in front of your distinguished guests. I imagine the society pages, and perhaps a few business journals, would find that quite compelling." The threat hung heavy in the air. Damien's jaw worked, his eyes darting around at the curious, shocked faces of his guests. He was a man who prized his public image, his reputation for control and success. A public scandal involving his pregnant wife was the last thing he needed, especially with Alistair Finch, a key investor he'd been courting, watching the entire drama unfold with raised eyebrows. "This is not the time or the place, Elara," Damien growled, his voice dangerously low. "We will discuss this later, in private." "We will discuss some of it now, Damien," Elara insisted. "You owe me an explanation. You owe these people," she gestured to the silent, watching crowd, "an explanation for why you would ban the mother of your child from a celebration of that child's impending arrival." Among the guests, Elara spotted a few familiar faces. There was Mrs. Albright, a formidable society doyen, whose opinion carried significant weight. Mr. Chen, a vital international partner for Vance Industries, and even Chloe, who had managed to get an invitation through a sympathetic, distant cousin of Damien's. Chloe caught Elara's eye and gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod of encouragement, her eyes shining with pride. Isabel, however, was not about to cede the spotlight or admit defeat. "An explanation," she scoffed, her voice regaining its shrill edge. "The explanation, my dear, is that you've been nothing but a source of stress and instability for Damien. He's been worried sick about you, about your erratic behavior. This party was meant to be a joyous occasion, and you're ruining it with your theatrics." "My theatrics," Elara repeated, a humorless laugh escaping her. "Isabel, you've been systematically trying to undermine my marriage and alienate me from my husband for months. You've dripped poison into his ears, twisted my words, and manipulated him into believing I'm some sort of liability." "How dare you speak to my sister like that?" Damien snarled, stepping forward protectively. "And how dare you, Damien?" Elara countered, her voice rising with emotion. "Allow her to. How dare you believe her over your own wife, the mother of your child?" The garden was utterly silent now, save for the tense, charged words exchanged between them. The string quartet had long since trailed off, their instruments resting in their laps as they watched transfixed. Waiters stood, frozen trays in hand. Marcus Thorne, who had been observing the escalating confrontation with a keen, almost predatory interest, chose this moment to step forward slightly. "Perhaps," he interjected, his calm voice cutting through the tension, "we should discuss the more tangible aspects of this situation. Miss Vance, you mentioned Mrs. Vance being a source of stress for her husband. My firm has recently been looking into various sources of stress related to the Vance family and its finances, and we've found some rather illuminating patterns." Isabel's face, already flushed with anger, paled considerably. I don't know what you're talking about." Damien looked from Thorne to Isabel, a flicker of confusion, then dawning suspicion in his eyes. "What patterns? What are you implying, Thorne?" "I'm not implying anything." "Mr. Vance," Thorne said, his gaze locking onto Isabel. "I'm stating that certain financial records pertaining to Miss Vance's art gallery, Gallery Isabel, and several offshore accounts linked to it show irregularities that Vance Industries' CFO might find alarming, especially given how generously Vance Industries has been propping up the gallery's rather significant losses for the past 3 years. Isabel swayed slightly, her hand flying to her chest. "This is slander, lies." "Damien, don't listen to him. He's trying to distract from Elara's outrageous behavior." But Damien wasn't looking at Isabel anymore. He was looking at Marcus Thorne, then at Elara, a terrible understanding dawning in his eyes. The accusation, specific and financial, had hit a nerve that Elara's emotional appeals had not. He knew on some level that his sister's gallery was a drain, but he'd trusted her. Had that trust been misplaced, Isabel? Damien said, his voice dangerously quiet. "What is Mr. Thorne talking about?" Before Isabel could formulate a sputtering denial, Thorne pressed his advantage. "Perhaps, Miss Vance, you'd care to explain the series of large cash withdrawals from the gallery's operational fund over the last 6 months? Or the transfers to a certain high-stakes poker club in Macau that seems to be your preferred vacation spot? Funds that coincidentally correspond with increased consulting fees billed to Vance Industries by your gallery." The color completely drained from Isabel's face. She looked trapped, exposed. The guests murmured their earlier shock, now mingled with avid, scandalized interest. This was better than any reality show. Elara watched a strange sense of detachment washing over her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about truth, about the unraveling of a web of deceit that had nearly destroyed her. She looked at Damien, whose face was a maelstrom of emotions. Anger, betrayal, confusion. And perhaps, just perhaps, the first flicker of dawning regret. The magnificent baby shower so carefully orchestrated by Isabel to celebrate her own social standing was rapidly devolving into her public downfall. And Elara Vance, the wife who was supposed to be hidden away in shame, stood at the very center of it, no longer a victim, but the catalyst for a reckoning. The silence in the garden was thick enough to cut with one of the silver cake knives sitting unused on the dessert table. All eyes were on Isabel Vance, whose carefully constructed facade was crumbling with every passing second. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her fuchsia gown suddenly looking garish and desperate against her pale skin. Damien finally tore his gaze from Thorne and fixed it on his sister. The hurt and dawning fury in his eyes were palpable. "Isabel," he said, his voice raspy. "Answer Mr. Thorne. What is this about Macau? About these withdrawals?" Isabel opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked wildly around, as if seeking an escape route. But she was hemmed in by a circle of stunned faces and the unyielding stare of her brother. Marcus Thorne, ever the consummate professional, didn't let the pressure drop. "Perhaps I can assist, Ms. Vance. My team has been quite thorough. It appears Gallery Isabel has been a conduit not just for art, but for siphoning rather substantial sums from Vance Industries. We have traced approximately $8 million over the past 18 months, routed through various shell accounts before ultimately benefiting your personal, recreational activities." He paused, letting the sum hang in the air. A sum, I might add, that could have funded several actual artists, rather than just one very expensive gambling habit. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Even by Bel Air standards, $2.8 million was a significant embezzlement, especially from one's own brother. "Gambling." Damien whispered the word raw with disbelief. He remembered Isabel's increasingly frequent art-buying trips to Asia, her vague explanations, her requests for just a little more capital to secure a promising new artist. He had indulged her, trusted her. His sister. Isabel finally found her voice, a desperate, shrill cry. "He's lying. This is a setup. Elara put him up to this. She's trying to destroy me, Damien, to drive a wedge between us." She pointed a trembling finger at Elara. "She's the manipulative one. She's always been jealous of my bond with you." Elara met her accusation with a calm sadness. "Jealous, Isabel, I pitied you. I saw how much you relied on Damien, how insecure you were beneath all that bravado. I tried to be your friend. But you couldn't stand to see Damien happy with anyone but you, could you? You couldn't stand the thought of sharing his attention or his money." "It's my money too," Isabel shrieked, her composure completely gone. Our father left us both comfortable, but he always favored Damien. Everything came easy to him. The brains, the success, the empire, while I had to struggle. Struggle. Damien interjected, his voice laced with a bitter irony that Elara had never heard from him before. I gave you seed money for the gallery. I covered its losses year after year. I gave you a stipend that most people would consider a fortune. You call that struggling Izzy? The childhood nickname sounded like an accusation on his lips. You don't understand the pressures, Isabel cried, tears now streaming down her face, leaving mascara tracks on her pale cheeks. The art world, it's ruthless. I needed to maintain a certain image, to entertain, to keep up appearances, by gambling away company funds in Macau. Thorne asked, his tone deceptively mild. An interesting strategy for keeping up appearances. I have copies of casino markers, Ms. Vance, and bank transfer records. Would you like me to share them with the guests, or perhaps with the DA's office? The mention of the district attorney's office seemed to finally pierce through Isabel's hysteria. Her eyes widened in terror. She looked at Damien, her expression imploring. Damien, please. You wouldn't. I'm your sister. Damien looked at her, his face a hardened mask. The love and indulgence he had once held for Isabel seemed to have evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard anger. My sister, he said slowly, has been stealing from me. My sister has been systematically lying to me. My sister tried to destroy my marriage and discredit my pregnant wife, possibly to prevent her own deceit from being discovered. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the shocked faces of his guests, lingering for a moment on Alistair Finch, who was watching with an expression of grim fascination. Damien knew the damage this scandal could do to his reputation, his business. But the personal betrayal cut deeper. He turned back to Isabel. The question, Izzy, is what else have you lied about? Isabel seemed to shrink under his gaze. The fight went out of her. She sagged her shoulders, slumped, a picture of utter defeat. Elara watched this painful exchange, a knot in her own stomach. There was no triumph in Isabel's downfall, only a profound sadness for the brokenness of the family, for the poison that had been allowed to fester for so long. But there was also a sense of vindication. Her truth was out. Marcus Thorne chose this moment to subtly steer the proceedings. Mr. Vance, given these revelations, I trust you now understand why Mrs. Vance felt the need for legal representation, and why her attendance at her own baby shower is not only appropriate but essential. Damien looked at Elara, truly looked at her perhaps for the first time in months. He saw not the emotional, unstable woman Isabel had painted, but a woman of strength, dignity, and profound hurt. A woman who had faced down his cruelty and his sister's machinations with courage. The scale of his own blindness, his own gullibility, hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had been a fool, manipulated by Isabel, and in his arrogance and insecurity, he had turned on the one person who had offered him genuine love and partnership. He remembered Elara's initial joy about the pregnancy, her gentle enthusiasm for the nursery, her attempts to connect with Isabel, all of which he had dismissed or allowed his sister to ridicule. He remembered the coldness in his own voice as he banned her from the shower. The shame was a burning coal in his gut. Elara, he began, his voice hoarse. I don't know what to say. Perhaps, Elara said quietly, you can start by telling your guests that your wife is welcome in her own home, and then perhaps you can apologize to her. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the wreckage of trust and the faint, tentative possibility of rebuilding. The guests remained silent witnesses to a drama far more compelling than any they had anticipated. Isabel, meanwhile, seemed to have collapsed in on herself. Two of her society friends, who had been eager to associate with the Vance name, now subtly distanced themselves, their expressions a mixture of pity and revulsion. The party was well and truly over. One of Damien's senior executives, a pragmatic woman named Genevieve Croft, who Elara had always respected, stepped forward. "Damien," she said quietly but firmly, "perhaps we should adjourn this gathering. Allow you and Elara some privacy. Mr. Thorne, Ms. Vance, I think it's best if you accompany us inside." Damien nodded numbly. He looked utterly defeated, his earlier anger replaced by a dazed confusion. He offered a weak general apology to his remaining guests. I apologize for this disruption. Please help yourselves to refreshments. I need to sort this out." Most guests, however, sensing the raw, private nature of what was to come, began to make their excuses, murmuring polite departures, their eyes still wide with the scandal they had just witnessed. They would be dining out on this story for weeks. Alistair Finch gave Damien a curt, unreadable nod, and was one of the first to leave a clear indication that any potential investment was now highly unlikely. The financial fallout from Isabel's actions and Damien's public handling of it was already beginning. Elara watched them go, feeling a strange emptiness. She had won this battle, exposed the truth. But what was the prize? A broken husband, a family in tatters. Marcus Thorne gently touched her arm. "Mrs. Vance, let's go inside. There are still matters to discuss." She nodded, taking one last look at the beautiful garden, now tainted by the ugliness that had unfolded. The perfectly arranged flowers, the untouched cake, the silent string quartet. It was all a monument to a dream that had soured. With Thorne by her side, and a shattered Damien trailing behind them with Genevieve Croft and a now sobbing Isabel Elara, walked back into the house, away from the public gaze, towards an uncertain future. The fight for her dignity had been won. The fight for her marriage, if it was even worth fighting for, had just begun. The opulent living room, usually a space for formal entertaining, felt like a courtroom. Elara sat on one of the plush velvet sofas, Marcus Thorne, beside her a file Penyabab open office not responding Dan Kara, Mengatasinya per android, resting on the polished mahogany coffee table. Damien paced the length of the room. His movements agitated his face, a mask of conflicting emotions. Anger at Isabel, shame at his own actions, and a dawning horror at the extent of the betrayal. Isabel was huddled in an armchair in the corner, weeping uncontrollably, attended to by a stony-faced Genevieve Croft, who seemed to be there less as a comfort and more as a corporate chaperone, ensuring Isabel didn't say or do anything to further damage Vance Industries. $2.8 million, Isabel, Damien finally ground out, stopping his pacing to glare at his sister. "You stole nearly $3 million from my company. From me." "I was going to pay it back," Isabel wailed, her voice muffled by her hands. "I just needed a big win. One more. I had a system." "A system for losing, apparently," Thorne interjected dryly without looking up from his notes. "Our forensic accountants estimate your net losses from various online and physical casinos are closer to $3.5 million over 2 years. The gallery was just one of your funding sources. You also seem to have leveraged lines of credit against shared family properties that your brother was unaware of." Damien paled further. "Shared properties? What are you talking about?" Thorne finally looked up, his gaze sharp. The Aspen ski chalet, Mr. Vance, and a portion of the Hamptons estate. Ms. Vance appears to have forged your signature on documents securing secondary mortgages. The banks are likely to come calling very soon. Damien sank into a chair opposite Elara, looking utterly winded, as if he'd been physically struck. Forged my signature. Aspen. The Hamptons. God, Izzy. The betrayal was so profound, so multi-layered, it was almost incomprehensible. Elara watched him, her own anger warring with a surprising flicker of pity. He looked broken. This was the man who exuded control, who commanded boardrooms and built empires. Now he was a victim of his own sister's rapacious greed and his own blind trust. "Why, Isabel?" Damien asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why would you do all this? And why? Why turn on Elara so viciously?" Isabel sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Her expensive dress now rumpled and tear-stained. "Because," she said, her voice thick with resentment, "she was going to get everything. You adored her. You were going to give her a baby, the heir to your precious Vance name. Where did that leave me? I saw how you looked at her. I was becoming irrelevant. An afterthought. She was stealing you from me. Stealing me!" Damien looked incredulous. "Izzy, I'm your brother, not your possession. And Elara tried to be your friend. She encouraged me to spend time with you to support your gallery, the gallery you were using to rob me blind. I just wanted what was mine," Isabel insisted stubbornly. "My share of the family legacy. What you wanted was a blank check for your addiction," Thorne stated calmly. "And you were prepared to destroy Mrs. Vance's reputation, perhaps even her marriage, to ensure your access to that blank check wasn't interrupted by a new wife and child taking precedence." The pieces clicked into place for Damien with sickening clarity. Isabel's constant whispers about Elara being a gold digger, her suggestions that Elara was trying to isolate him from his family, it had all been projection, a smokescreen to hide her own desperate schemes, and he, blinded by years of sibling loyalty and a refusal to see his sister's flaws, had bought into it. He'd allowed Isabel to poison his mind against Elara, culminating in the monstrous act of banning her from her own baby shower. He looked at Elara, his eyes filled with a profound, aching regret. "Elara," he said, his voice cracking, "I am so sorry. I was a fool, a blind, arrogant fool. I let Isabel manipulate me. I listened to her lies. I hurt you. I hurt us. Unforgivably." Elara met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Yes, Damien," she said quietly. "You did." The simple affirmation, devoid of anger or accusation, was more damning than any tirade. It laid bare the truth of his failure. Genevieve Croft, ever the pragmatist, cleared her throat. "Damien, we need to consider the legal ramifications for Isabel and the financial exposure for Vance Industries. Mr. Thorne, I assume your client has demands." Thorne nodded. "Primarily, Mrs. Vance wants several things. First, a full public retraction from Ms. Vance regarding any defamatory statements made about Elara. Though given today's events, her credibility is somewhat shot." Isabel flinched. "Second, Ms. Vance is to have no further contact with Elara or her child indefinitely. Third, Ms. Vance will agree to enter a comprehensive treatment program for her gambling addiction with proof of attendance and progress provided." He continued. "Regarding the financial malfeasance, Mrs. Vance does not wish to see her sister-in-law incarcerated, primarily for the sake of the unborn child, not having this particular scandal attached to their early life. However, full restitution will be made to Vance Industries. Ms. Vance will liquidate her assets, including the gallery, or what's left of it, and any personal holdings to repay what she has stolen and forged. Any shortfall will be addressed by other means from her share of family assets, if any remain untouched. Isabel looked horrified at the prospect of losing everything but the alternative. Criminal charges, prison, was clearly terrifying her into silence. "And what about me, Elara?" Damien asked, his voice raw. "What do you want from me?" Elara looked at her husband, the father of her child. The love she had felt for him was still there, buried deep beneath layers of hurt and betrayal. But trust, that was shattered. "I don't know yet, Damien," she said honestly. "Right now I need space. I need to think. I need to ensure my baby is born into a safe and stable environment. Not this." She gestured vaguely at the opulent room, now a symbol of their fractured lives. "I understand," he said, his shoulders slumping. "Whatever you decide, Elara, I will accept it. I deserve it." He ran a hand through his hair, looking older and more careworn than she had ever seen him. "As for Isabel, she will repay every cent, and she will get help. And yes, she will stay away from you and the baby." He shot a hard look at his sister. "That is non-negotiable, Izzy. Do you understand?" Isabel, defeated and broken, could only nod, fresh tears welling. Thorne then brought up the pre-nuptial agreement. "Given the circumstances, Mr. Vance, specifically the undue influence and emotional distress directly linked to your sister's actions which you, however, unwittingly facilitated, certain clauses of your prenuptial agreement could be strongly contested, especially those pertaining to actions detrimental to the family reputation, as it seems Ms. Vance is the primary perpetrator there. However, Mrs. Vance is not at this moment seeking to dissolve the marriage. She is seeking a post-nuptial amendment." Damien looked surprised. "A post-nup?" "Yes," Thorne affirmed. "One that ensures Mrs. Vance and your child are unconditionally provided for, irrespective of the state of your marriage. One that clearly delineates assets and protects her from any future financial fallout from family members." His gaze flickered towards Isabel. "And one that includes significant penalties for any actions on your part that could be construed as coercive, manipulative, or emotionally abusive. Consider it an insurance policy for Mrs. Vance's peace of mind." Damien nodded slowly. "Draft it. I'll sign it. Whatever Elara needs, whatever it takes." The immediate crisis seemed to be drawing to a close, but the true emotional fallout was just beginning. Genevieve arranged for Isabel to be discreetly escorted from the premises, not back to her own apartment, which was likely leased and about to be unaffordable, but to a private clinic that specialized in addiction and psychological care, a place where she could begin to confront her demons away from the public eye. The following weeks were a period of quiet reflection and careful rebuilding for Elara. Staying with Chloe in her cozy, unpretentious apartment was a balm to Elara's wounded spirit. Gone were the silent, judging eyes of the Bel Air mansion staff, the oppressive weight of unspoken accusations. Here there was laughter, comfort food, and the unwavering support of a true friend. Chloe guarded Elara's privacy fiercely, fending off the inevitable media inquiries that followed the spectacular implosion of the Vance baby shower. The story, pieced together from gossipy guests and anonymous sources, became a minor sensation in the tabloids. Millionaire's sister scams him for millions. Pregnant wife exposes all. Marcus Thorne handled the legalities with swift efficiency. The post-nuptial agreement was drafted, reviewed by Damien's chastened lawyers and signed without contention. It was ironclad, securing Elara and her child's future, regardless of her marital decisions. Isabel, stripped of her assets and facing the harsh reality of her addiction and deceit, remained in treatment, her communication with the outside world severely restricted. Damien, true to his word, began the arduous process of financial restitution to Vance Industries. A humbling experience for a man of his pride. The Aspen Chalet and the Hamptons property were indeed heavily mortgaged. Disentangling Isabel's financial web was a nightmare that would take months. His business suffered a hit with Alistair Finch, formally pulling his potential investment, and other partners viewing Damien with a new wariness. The veneer of untouchable success had been cracked. Damien, for his part, respected Elara's need for space. He didn't push, didn't plead. His communication came in the form of brief, respectful texts checking on her health and that of the baby, and through his lawyers, who confirmed every step taken to meet Thorne's demands. He sent flowers, simple bouquets of freesias, her favorite, not the ostentatious displays Isabel favored. He also started therapy, a fact Thorne quietly relayed to Elara. He was, it seemed, genuinely trying to understand his own failings. As her due date approached, Elara had to make a decision. Chloe's apartment, while comforting, wasn't equipped for a newborn. The Bel Air mansion, despite its ghosts, was her home, and the nursery, painted in its cheerful, sunny yellow, she'd had Isabel's monochrome scheme summarily removed, was ready. More importantly, she had to decide what role, if any, Damien would play in their child's life beyond financial support. One cool evening, she asked Damien to meet her at a neutral location, a quiet park overlooking the ocean. He arrived looking tired but composed, a stark contrast to the arrogant tycoon or the broken man she had last seen. "Thank you for meeting me," he said softly. "Damien." Elara began, her hand resting on her prominent belly. "Our child will be born soon. Whatever has happened between us, you are the father. I want you to be involved in our baby's life. If you're willing to do the work to be a true partner, a true parent." Hope flickered in his eyes. "I am Elara. More than anything. I know I have a long way to go to prove myself to you, to earn even a fraction of your trust back. But I'm committed to that, to us, to our family." "I'm not ready to talk about us yet, Damien," she said gently but firmly. "I'm willing to come home. For the baby. We will co-parent. And we will see if us can ever be rebuilt. But it will be on new terms. Terms of absolute honesty, mutual respect, and no more secrets. No more allowing anyone, not even family, to come between us." "I understand," he said, nodding. "New terms, I agree. Whatever it takes." 2 weeks later, Elara gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Amelia. Damien was there by her side, holding her hand. His eyes filled with an awe and tenderness Elara hadn't seen since their earliest days. Looking at him cradling their daughter, his face etched with a love so profound, it was breathtaking. Elara felt the first genuine thaw in her heart. And there you have it, a story of betrayal, resilience, and the dramatic consequences of underestimating a woman. Pushed too far, Elara's journey from a humiliated wife to an empowered mother shows that true strength isn't about wealth or status, but about integrity and the courage to fight for it. Damien learned the hard way that secrets and deceit have a price, and Isabel's world came crashing down under the weight of her own greed. What did you think of Elara's power move? Could Damien ever truly earn back her trust? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of emotions and dramatic twists, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with your friends who love a good story. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, so you don't miss our next thrilling tale. Thanks for listening.